Ladies and gents, welcome back to What's Happening Wednesday, the series where I aim to provide you the industry perspective and on the latest happenings in gaming news, events, and trends. And today we're going to cover the new era of gaming that is upon us. The single player games era is here. But now, before we get into that, we need to pay our respects, all right? Throw the salutes up, get your glass ready, and pour one out for the end of the live service games. I'm talking Anthem, I'm talking Concord, Suicide Squad, X Defiant, and many, many more. We pay our respects. You had a good run, but the era is over, and now it's time for us to go to the next, which tees us up for the new era and the rebirth of single-player games. Now, if you've been paying close attention for the past couple of years, you probably would have already noticed that single-player games are popping off. Like, we had Elden Ring winning Game of the Year in 2022, then Baldur's Gate 3, and now this year, Astrobot. Like, these games are consistently getting numbers, and it's not just these critically acclaimed games too. If we take a look at the numbers, right? First and foremost, single player games are something gamers want. Like, this isn't just a coincidence that we're noticing them win all these rewards. 53% of people want a single player game, which is up from previous years. So we're slowly shifting away from that multiplayer dominated space, and we're now going into the single player era. And that's kind of seen from the games that have been released in the past year. You take a look at Hogwarts Legacy, sold 22 million copies in the past, year for a game that frankly wasn't like the greatest single player game. It was a good game, don't get me wrong, but you could probably get a similar RPG experience from something else. We have Warhammer Space Marine selling 4.5 million copies in just over a month. Metaphor ReFantazio, another 1 million in a day. And then that Astrobot, that game of the year this year, 1.5 million copies since it launched. Like, these numbers are crazy. And then the latest one that came on the scene, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. At the start of February, this game came out, and it has already sold 2 million copies. So those numbers alone just show you that not only is there a supply of single player games starting to come in, but the demand is huge. So that begs the question, right? Like, okay, people want these games, but where exactly is this trend rooted from? Why is it happening? What are the causes of it? And to get down and solve that question, we have to look at two different facets. The first one being the consumer, so us, the gamers, we the people. And then the second one being the companies, so those studios, those publishers, and what their mindset is. So let's first tackle the consumer perspective, because honestly, to me, that's the most important one, because that's us as gamers. So there's a couple reasons why we as consumers and gamers are trending towards single player games. And the first one being is, man, we just got no more time in our lives, okay? There's too many good games and we don't have enough time. But what I really mean there is, with live service games, right? The reason so many games flamed out is because there's already so many foundational games that a lot of us kind of look as like pillars in our gaming careers. Like, I'm talking your League of Legends, your World of Warcraft, your Call of Duty, your Fortnite now, and now even it looks like Marvel Rivals might be a game that stays. Basically, those games that no matter how much time passes, you still pick up and play consistently, whether it's to play a competitive game or with your friends. And that's also why it was really hard for new live service games to break in, is because even if it's a good game, you got that loyalty. Like, you've grinded League of Legends for 5 years. You're not about to stop now. Your brain is chalked. So that's one facet. But how single player games come into this equation and help solve it is that they break the monotony and fatigue that we get from playing multiplayer games. So think of it as like you eat McDonald's five times a week. All right, that's your consistent meal. But then you go and have a Michelin star meal. All right, that Michelin star meal helps break up the monotony and fatigue you get from eating McDonald's all the time. It's not to say you don't enjoy McDonald's, but man, you deserve to treat yourself and try something new. And to put it in gaming terms, like, single player games give you a finite experience. It has a beginning, it has an end, and they're usually well curated and crafted to where you play the experience, you've had that whole experience, and you come out of it feeling great, you had a lot of fun, and you know that you're done with that game. You can push it to the side, and you're ready to go back to maybe it's your foundational games or pick up a new single player game. if you just got that sweet taste of that Michelin star meal and you want more. All right. So that kind of takes care of the consumer side of things. Now taking a look at the business or the companies and the publishers and what their mindset is, it honestly boils down to really cost. Like at the end of the day, companies are motivated by the cost and the revenue that they can get from putting in cost, right? So taking a look at our earlier example of Hogwarts Legacy, right? 150 million is what the budget was to make it. And this is on the higher end of a single player game. Like the reason it's at 150 million is one, it's a AAA game, but two, it's also based on a really popular IP, Harry Potter. So that also equates to why it's a really high costing game. Now, to put that in comparison of a successful live service game, let's take Genshin Impact, which if you watched the last video, you know this is my favorite example when I'm talking about live service games. Genshin Impact cost 100 million of initial investment to stand up. So you can see that's already less than Hogwarts Legacy, 50 million less. But to routinely launch a new year or a season or whatever it operates in content, it costs Genshin Impact 200 million annually. So you are paying more money than you did to start the game than you are making like a Hogwarts Legacy year after year. And Genshin Impact is incredibly successful. They make about $1 billion in revenue a year. So this investment is worth it. But you can kind of see how live service games for others, this is way too much of a cost to incur and way too much money to make back year over year, given how saturated the market is and how the revenue isn't guaranteed. Like the difference is like with a single player game like Hogwarts Legacy, you know, once you launch that game, majority of your sales are coming at launch, and then you probably at worst for most games recoup the money that you put in. You know, if it's really bad, you'll lose some money. But for most of the time, most games are able to break even, if not maybe lose a little bit. And then you can see how it can 5x, 10x if you do really well. With a live service game, you are totally reliant on microtransactions. So not only is your cost higher, you are banking on people buying your cosmetics, you know, your weapon charm skins, so on and so forth, to make back these crazy amounts of cost. So you can kind of see that it is not a really sustainable business model comparative to a single player game where, you know, your revenue potential might be a bit smaller, but the cost you're putting in is significantly lower than a live service game. That would kind of encompass like the most important reason. But another reason that I think a lot of people overlook why single player games are, you know, making a comeback is because of creative fatigue. We forget at the end of the day, the gaming industry is a creative industry. And when you have people continuously working on live service games, their minds can only come up with so much new content for something they've been working on for the last, you know, 10 years, 5 to 10, 15 years. Like there's only so many new ways you can make a hero or change a weapon or tune something else or make a new map. You eventually hit a wall and start releasing subpar content, which in turn leads to you have a dwindling player base and you're not bringing any new people into your franchise. So single player games are a great way to kind of offshoot, bring a new branch of people in. Maybe they end up picking up your multiplayer game or something. Or if you're a studio who doesn't have any, you just have a new fan base of people that will follow each one of your projects. But regardless, your studio devs are happy because they get to work on new experiences. And your players are happy too, your customers, because they're not like, oh, this feels like the same thing every year, you know, or the content you've released since the beginning is now starting to get worse. So all of this kind of culminates into the reason why single player games are getting the traction to lead them into being the next biggest trend. So that sets the scene for I would say our next 5 to 8 years is we are going to see such an influx of single player games being created. But with that being said, you know, there are some things that I do anticipate happening in the next 5 to 8 years that I want to call out. So first being, we're going to see, and we kind of touched on this, but huge publishers are no longer going to be taking gambles on these live service multiplayer games. Like outside of GTA 6 and the occasional one here or there, you know, Marvel Rivals was a huge, you know, gamble as well, but that one paid off. But for the most part, you're not going to see companies do this. And instead of gambling their money and their resources, because at the end of the day, they're AAA studios, they got to be working on something. They're actually going to be making single player games that are reboots, remakes or revives of old franchises that have died out. And we're already starting to see this, especially with the last PlayStation showcase, last Xbox showcase. Like, so many franchises are getting revived along with old great single player games getting remakes because they're trying to cater to this new audience that won single player games, but maybe they're younger and they haven't experienced some of the storied franchises from back in the day. So it's a low cost, low effort way to get into a growing trend and help capture some of that market share and get profit from, you know, maybe making it's the trade-off is instead of making a new IP, I've spent less money and I'm able to get, you know, maybe the same revenue back because it's ultimately feels like a new IP for players that haven't played it. So that's taking care of the big publishers, right? Now, the smaller and mid-sized companies also have an incentive to make single player games because, again, the cost is so much cheaper compared to a live service game. So they're extremely happy about this. And then second, there's more of a chance for you to recoup your money too. Because at the end of the day, a lot of smaller to mid-sized companies they're not going to be making that 5x, that 10x. So their profit margins are even more important because that could be what decides that they stay afloat. Now, without that being said, the only single player game that really matters is Silksong. Okay, so please drop Silksong. Please, please, please. No, I'm playing. But anyway, so that kind of takes care of that point. And then now the one thing I do want to, call out as something to watch out for us as gamers and consumers is with the influx of single player games being made, you are going to get more games that are not well done. Like, that's just the reality of when we reach a new trend in gaming. And what I mean by that is, I'll take an extreme example, but looking at the Cyberpunk launch, how poor that was. That game launched in a state that basically felt like an alpha. We might not see that level of unpolished games, but we are going to see more games that feel a little bit buggy and a little bit messy at launch due to companies trying to cut corners, cut costs, and bring that overhead down so that when they launch it, they still capture their sales and their margin for profit is better. Now, with that being said, I would just say watch out on like pre-ordering games. Maybe wait a little bit if it's a studio you haven't heard of or if it's a new project to see how the release actually goes, and then maybe buy it after like a month or so. Because it's unfortunate reality that we live in where studios get pressured to release content even if they know it's not ready, because ultimately these businesses have to appease the shareholders, and the shareholders are demanding that we need to hit this cycle during, the holidays or something to maximize our revenue. They ultimately get the final say than like a studio dev saying, hey man, like the game's not ready, we need like 4 or 5 months. Like, they don't get that final say, unfortunately, and that's just kind of how it works. Overall, I'm extremely excited to embrace this new era of gaming. So comment down below, let me know, what single player games are you the most excited for? Is it Silksong like me? Or is it some other new IP, or maybe something, that you loved in your childhood that's getting rebooted? But that'll put a wrap on this week's What's Happening Wednesday. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you learned something, and I'll catch you in the next. All right, take care. Bye, 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 bye.